Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. Welcome to our week in review. It's been a little bit of a quiet week after the New Year's, but nevertheless, there is news to be wrapped up. Today, we got another month of good jobs numbers, 216,000 jobs created in the month of December. This makes for 2 years of unemployment under 4%. That hasn't happened since the 1960s. And to boot, the increase in wages is continuing to exceed the inflation rate. So real wages, that is take-home pay, has been rising. And that is all very, very good news for Americans. And you can tell it's good news because you get headlines in the New York Times like, oh, economy good, but will it last? Because, of course, they always have to have a negative. They always have to have trauma. They always have to have a dig at the president. So that's the telltale sign that things are going pretty well, if that's the kind of headline you're reading. Meanwhile, in preparation for a year of heavy campaigning, the president released an ad this week, and it will be followed with a speech at Valley Forge on Saturday that will talk about the main issue of the campaign, which is the survival of our democracy. People who are worried that he didn't get it, or he was going to focus on the wrong thing, or he didn't really have the sense of attack, they can relax because I think this campaign knows exactly what this is about. This is about making sure voters understand Donald Trump is an extremist, a crazy. He has dictatorial ambitions. And if we have an election in which he's the winner, that may be our last election. No joke, as he would say. Donald Trump is not running a normal campaign because he's not a normal candidate. He is someone who has pledged to use the military to suppress dissent. He is someone who has promised to round up and deport immigrants. He is promising to expand the Muslim ban that he tried when he was in office. He is going full force in terms of acquiring all of the power of government to use as his personal power and his personal means of retribution. He said he's going to use the Justice Department to go after his enemies. He said he's going to shred the civil service and replace it with people who are loyal to him. And if you don't think he's going to do it, look what he tried when he was in office, when he actually had people who were willing to stand up to him from time to time. Now, in the second term, it's going to be people like Stephen Miller. It's going to be people like Steve Bannon. There's not going to be any internal checks on him. His foreign policy people will be crackpots like him. And if we think Congress is going to act as a check, we've seen over the last year what the House Democrats are about. They are spineless. They will do anything for him, including trying to impeach the president with absolutely no evidence of anything. So the notion that he would somehow be tamed in a second term is really nonsense. In fact, he'll be much, much worse and much, much more dangerous. And it still disturbs me that you have this many people, tens of millions of Republicans, who are prepared to vote for him. And that brings us to Iowa, which will be a week from Tuesday. What's going to happen there? Well, I think we all know Donald Trump is going to win, but that's just the first question. The real question is, will this be competitive in any sense? And I'll have a piece about this on Sunday in the Washington Post, a shameless plug. But really, the only person who at this point, I think, has the ability to make this at all competitive is Nikki Haley. Let's face it, Ron DeSantis has flunked the barely human qualification. He's awkward, he's weird, he's off-putting. He hasn't run on anything other than I'll be like Trump without being Trump. And it would not surprise me if he doesn't make it past Iowa. But for Nikki Haley's purposes, I think it's very important she actually beat him. Because imagine if you have a candidate as bad as Ron DeSantis, and nevertheless he beats her. What's she got to say? One would think that if she's going to present herself as really the only alternative to Trump, she needs to come in second. And what's more, she needs to make that margin respectable. What does that mean? Well, definitely less than 30 points. It'd be nice if she kept it under 20 points. But consider if she has an opportunity after the votes are counted, remember this is a caucus, to make a speech that has prime time viewership, where really she's going to have the biggest audience she's ever had since her campaign began last February. She has an extraordinary opportunity to make a splash and to make the next week all about her as opposed to all about Trump. Well, what could she say? Well, in my dream world, she would say, the guy's a crackpot. He's an insurrectionist. He should be in jail. You guys are nuts if you think he's going to be an acceptable president. But let's face it, she's not going to say anything like that. But what could she say? What could she say that would capture the attention of the media, of voters, that would create some viral moments? Well, how about something like this? Donald Trump is a wonderful example of a suicide mission. Donald Trump, if we nominate him, may very well get convicted of multiple crimes. And then where will we be? Donald Trump is not going to run a normal campaign. He's going to make it all about himself. He's going to rerun 2020. He's going to talk about whales and wind turbines. In other words, make clear that he is too risky, too nutty, and too problematic for Republicans. Could she do that? I think she's capable of doing it. The question is, will she? She's got to stop this ill-begotten notion that simply by being nice, by being different than Trump, by being younger than Trump, she can somehow beat Trump. No, she's got to attack him. She's got to prove to Republican voters that if they care about winning, if they think that Joe Biden is the worst thing in the world, then they better have someone who's viable. And they can't run a winning campaign with a crackpot who may be convicted of crimes before November. So it would be a big risk. But on the other hand, what has she got to lose? Otherwise, she's going to come in second, a distant second. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday, whether she's able to summon the nerve to make that kind of pitch, and whether she comes in a respectable second. If not, I think the race is essentially over before it began. And believe me, it may be over anyway. Now, we also have these various lawsuits, these various cases making their way around. We have Alvin Bragg, who may be the first prosecutor to take a shot at Donald Trump. That is currently scheduled for March. But before that, if we are fortunate, we may still get the DC January 6th case. Now, that, as we speak, is under appeal, or one issue is under appeal at the DC Circuit. The DC Circuit is considering whether Trump has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. It's a crackpot theory. It casts him in the role of a monarch, an absolute monarch. And I have every confidence that the DC Circuit is going to slap that down and slap it down very quickly. And then the question becomes, what does the Supreme Court do? Does it actually take this case and spend time mulling it over? I think it would be an easy course for the Supreme Court to either simply deny cert, in other words, say whatever the circuit court said is fine with us, or to take it and then summarily affirm. Because as bad as the Supreme Court is, I do not see them taking the position that a president can do anything, and not face any criminal consequences after the fact. So I think that's a loser, but we should keep an eye on it because, as in all things, timing is everything. We need for the case in DC to proceed with some expedition, hopefully in the spring, so that we get a verdict on the key issue, which is he was an insurrectionist. He betrayed his oath, he betrayed our democracy, and he sent a mob up to the Hill to not only stop the proceedings, but frankly, to kill his own vice president. So that's one big case. Now, we also have a Colorado case out there. The Colorado Supreme Court made a ruling and a Secretary of State in Maine made the similar ruling that under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, Donald Trump has been disqualified. After all, he was involved in an insurrection. That case is now going up to the Supreme Court. So what are they going to do? I would make the argument that on its face, the 14th Amendment is perfectly clear. He is an insurrectionist. He was an officer. He aided and abetted an insurrection. And there's nothing in the 14th Amendment that says Congress has to act or there has to be a criminal conviction. That's the law. Do we think that this Supreme Court is going to do that? No, we don't think that they're going to apply that fairly and appropriately because it's this Supreme Court. They're a bunch of partisan hacks. So the parlor game in Washington these days is how are they going to get out of doing what they should be doing, which is applying the 14th Amendment? Well, there are a few theories that they may kick around, but my strong suspicion is that by early spring, they will have dismissed this argument and say Donald Trump can be on the ballot in whatever state he qualifies. Now, that does introduce a little bit of a wrinkle because, of course, the voting for the Republican nominee is probably going to be underway before the Supreme Court rules. So Republican voters, in addition to worrying about whether he will be convicted of a crime before November, should worry about whether they're voting for someone who's going to qualify for the ballot at all. So this is how problematic Donald Trump is, although the Republicans would like to pretend otherwise. So that's kind of the world of the 2024 nomination and political world. What's happening out there in the world? Well, push is going to come to shove because we are out of authorized money to give aid to Ukraine. And at this point, the ball is in the Republicans' court. They are holding the show up, not only because they are poodles for Vladimir Putin, but because they want to make a play at a extreme set of border provisions that will throw some red meat to their xenophobic white nationalist base. Now, if they were just asking for money, there would be no problem because, of course, the president offered as part of his supplemental bill billions of dollars for the border. So this is not about this. It's about their crazy policies. It's about really remaking the asylum laws, remaking our border processes that would, frankly, not even be constitutional and not abide by international law. So the real question now will be whether they seriously decide to negotiate with the president, come up with some reasonable compromise to get this done. And then they can actually show that they accomplished something. Remember, they've done nothing. They have accomplished nothing. But if they could at least point to one thing, okay, they got more money for the border, or they were tough on the border, they forced the president to do something, then at least they have something to run on. Otherwise, they have absolutely nothing. And meanwhile, of course, Ukraine is on its holding on by its fingernails, and our additional funding for Israel is also at risk. So Republicans have to decide just how defeatist they're going to be, how really indifferent to American leadership and to our allies they really are. And we would hope that at the end of the day, they realize it's in their own interest not to let Ukraine go down the tubes. It's in their interest to maintain aid to Israel, and that it's even in their interest to make a deal with this president, which would be unusual because, after all, we've had now over a year in which this Republican majority has accomplished nothing. The government has stayed open because of the Democrats. The government has declined to default on the debt because of the Democrats. So maybe it's time for the Republicans to actually do something. And that would be a first. So we have many weeks ahead of political news. By the time we meet again, we will have had one more Republican debate under our belts and be looking at the the beginning of the presidential primary season. So what was once months and months away is now just around the corner. So if you like this program, please tell your friends. They can get Jen Rubin's Green Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.